I've been sitting on this video for a little while now, and not because I didn't think it was worth making, but because I wasn't sure exactly how to structure it. This challenge is a little bit of a different one than my usual can you beat style video. Instead, today I'm going to be asking the question, how much of Mad Max can you beat before ever talking to Jeet? Okay, so let me break that down and explain what I'm even talking about, especially for those less familiar with this game. So, Mad Max the game is a relatively open world experience. Once you finish the tutorial area, meaning everything you do with Chum in the first 50 minutes or so of the game, you're let out into the rest of the world with the main quest of seeking an audience with Jeet. Once you're free, you basically have the ability to go wherever you want to go on the map. So, you may now be asking, well, if you could just go anywhere right from the start, then what's the challenge? Well, I may have been a bit too liberal with my words earlier, but I did say basically anywhere. If you're familiar with this game, or have seen my other videos on Mad Max, you may recall a certain progression barrier that shares the same name with the thing that helps you chew your food. That's right. The jaw prevents you from accessing damn near half the map, and the only way to get through it is to talk to Jeet and progress the story. Or is it? Let's find out. Let's go together on this journey to find out how much of this game we can actually complete before even starting it. I do just want to mention right here what I'm considering complete. This means all the camps of an area being 100% clear, all the area scarecrows and snipers being demolished, and lowering every zone's threat down to 0. I'm not going to be clearing every little supply spot or doing every wasteland mission. One, because I actually can't do most of the wasteland missions, but also there's just far too many of these little scrap camps that I didn't want to go around collecting them all. It was already bad enough that I would have to do all the minefields without Dinky D. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get going on this. So I'm going to be skipping past all the tutorial type stuff since it's all kind of boring, but also because the tasks in the limited area we have access to are simply mandatory to move forward, so of course they're going to get done. Once I'm out of the prologue though, I'm freed into the Great White with the mission of meeting up with Jeet. This is the point of the story we're going to be stopping at for the rest of the run. From here on out, I can't visit anyone's stronghold. Instead, I focused on stopping off at a balloon nearby, and I did this for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 was to survey the area and mark all the enemy forces, but reason number 2 was for the ability to fast travel to them. This was important because anytime I would die, if I didn't have a fixed respawn point, I would be spawned back at the Sanctum. Now, upon exiting the balloon, I sought to pull down a few nearby scarecrows on my way over to an enemy convoy. After blasting the massive fuel tanks with my trusty shotgun, the leader of the convoy was toast and the route was now reclaimed. As I waited for my car to be repaired, I was getting shot at by a sniper a couple hundred yards away, so once the Opus was healthy enough to drive again, I drove straight to the base of his tower, sending him falling to his death. I collected the hood ornament and toppled another scarecrow before stopping off to talk with one of the survivors for intel on a nearby camp. And I decided to raid this camp immediately after this rendezvous. After wasting the warboys in the camp, I was free to collect all the spare scrap lying around, destroy all the Scrotus insignias, and explode the oil pumps for my first camp to be 100% completed. Next on my list of shit to do in this area was the death races. Now, I've only ever done the one that the main story pushes on you, and it was a welcome change from the things that I've been up to so far. Though, this would be the first and last race I would do, as I decided to leave them out. I was more focused on the things that lower Scrotus' threat. After sweeping the competition in my race, I was left with the non-Opus vehicle I was forced to race with. I tried using it to take out a scarecrow both during the race and right after, both ending with terrible outcomes. So I called for my Opus back and took out the 3 scarecrows in the immediate vicinity on my way to the Sand Sifter oil transfer camp. Taking out the warboys in this camp as well as the transfer tanks is a pretty easy task since I have virtually no restrictions on my combat for this run. It's more or less always finding the hidden scrap and insignias that takes up the most time. Well, for now at least. After this camp, I noticed that I was near another balloon, so I went up to scout out the Balefire Flatlands and acquire another fast travel point. On my path to remove the new scarecrows I'd found while up in the sky, I'd come across another convoy route, and funnily enough, the convoy was straight ahead of me. I hit the lead car head on, doing some pretty decent damage, then followed that up with some decent chase, and almost had him right where I wanted him, until I didn't. The Opus couldn't handle the damage and sent us flying like Ricky Bobby. Not allowing me to get out, I was unsuccessful in turning this convoy route over, and was spawned back at the Sanctum like I told you I would earlier. No worries though, since I still had some scarecrows down here that I needed to take care of, and another oil pump camp to infiltrate and complete to 100%. Once those were taken care of, there was only one camp left to clear, and it was a top dog camp. This is where the objective is to fight your way through the camp and up to an eventual boss fight. On my way to this camp, I upgraded some bits of my Opus since I had some scrap to spare. This camp was full of higher level warboys that had thicker skin and tougher fists. And I won't lie, there was definitely an instance or two where I thought I was cooked, but then I came across a water well, giving me the health I desperately needed. I made it all the way to the boss fight, got him all the way down to nearly 1 HP, then tragedy struck. His weapon kissed me. Oh well, the beauty of these camps is that they'll spawn you right outside them if you die before completing them, as well as retaining the amount of enemies left. So, in this case, they were all gone and I could freely head back up to take on the big boss.
Kept you waiting, huh?
No, not that one. This one. Once he was dealt with, I still had one more insignia left to destroy, and this thing was for sure Grandmaster or higher at hide and seek. But one day, I'd eventually find it and smash it to bits, liberating the camp completely. Treading back into Balefire, as it was close by, I drove over to the first camp beyond the border, the Dredges. Yet another transfer tank camp. I collected all the scrap, blew up all the tanks, and ate all the dog food. Then carried on to tear down a few scarecrows and snipers on my way over to the next balloon. This one would open up the fuel veins region and had quite a bit of things to do in it. One of the easiest things to get done in this new area, as you've already witnessed, is the scarecrows and snipers. But after taking out one of each of these in this new area, I ran into trouble with the second scarecrow. 2 enemy cars were here trying to ram me off the road. My harpoon now wasn't high enough level to tear it down just yet, and so I tried ramming it. Until the 2 chasing me damaged the Opus so much that I had to bail. I did manage to snag one of their cars and begin after the convoy that just passed by though. After doing some decent damage with this stolen ride, I had to ditch it on account of explosions. Calling back the Opus and catching back up to the convoy proved an easy enough task, and so was taking out the lead car. Just 2 bumps, and it was toast. Once I'd grabbed the hood ornament and got out of there, I unfortunately met my demise when trying to breach the walls of a local Scrotus camp. I respawned nearby, thankfully, and got back to taking out the perimeter defenses of the camp to then bust inside. This was a pretty big camp with lots of enemies inside, but after taking out the first group, the rest of the camp can be somewhat trivialized by hauling one of the gas cans from up above all the way down to the oil pumps and setting it on fire. A cutscene will play and the camp will become liberated. Of course, I made sure to grab the rest of the scrap lying around and smash the remaining insignias before I'd left. Just 2 minor objectives now stood between me and the next camp, Black Sands. It's another oil pump camp that's much smaller than the last one, but a bit more of a maze. Also, I had to leave this one unfinished for now, since I didn't have enough ammo to destroy all the insignias that were up too high to smash. I moved on to take on 2 more scarecrows before stumbling onto another convoy route. The actual convoy passing by was right next to the second scarecrow I was demolishing, so I went after it next. It was all going super well, until I got the lead car damaged enough to start spewing flames out of its ass. His buddies teamed up to pin me into his fireball of flames and knock me out of the fight, causing their health to reset. Luckily, the next time I found him, he was all alone, and I could make short work of him and collect his hood mount. After pulling this last scarecrow down, I'd completed most of everything in the fuel veins, and I was now moving on to discover the next area, Dry Gusty. I drove over and fought my way into the balloon to do my spotting, then busted my way into the closest enemy camp, which was the Wreck Hill Oil Transfer Camp. And nothing new here. It's the same old song and dance of fighting my way through a few groups of warboys, destroying the pumps, then collecting the rest of the objectives to complete the camp. Except, this one was much different from all of the others, as there seemed to be 1 insignia and a couple piles of scrap that I was somehow missing. After scouring the area thoroughly over and over again, I finally found the source of all my problems. There was a completely separate area from the main part of the camp that was closer to the gate that I'd busted in through. It was a small tower that was up a couple of ladders, and this is where I'd find my missing objectives. The camps of Dry Gusty are on nearly opposite sides of the region, so I decided to clear all the other smaller objectives on my way over there. Of course, running straight into a convoy as always. Thankfully, while I chased this one down, I was able to pierce and topple some of the snipers and scarecrows just off the route. And after failing to take down the convoy on my first attempt, I decided to loop back to one of the scarecrows I'd missed while chasing him. Then I'd reversed his route and meet back up with him from head on. This time, I'd managed to get off some serious damage on the leader from the get-go, but things got shaky fairly quickly. My car's health would hit critical and I needed to abandon her before she'd explode, and just as I was about to take the shot from on foot and put an end to all of this, I got smashed from behind by one of his goons. Thankfully though, I was able to get the Opus back and running, catch back up to him, and finally bury him into the sand. I grabbed some gas before getting back on the road and took the opportunity to go to the bathroom IRL. My dumbass forgot that I could simply just pause this game, but I didn't, so I'd almost fell at the hands of some simple warboys who'd found me. Thankfully, I'd come back just in time to get the hell out of there and back on track to the task at hand. Another sniper nest and scarecrow dismantling later, I'm finally headed to the stink gum camp to my west, coming into this with very little health. These camps are some of my favorite because all you have to do is defeat all the enemies within it, and this one contained only 12. This camp was a bit different also in the fact that there was a project part in here instead of a history relic. Just thought you should know. Also, it was another camp where the insignias were placed in some pretty sneaky positions. Dry Gusty was now complete, minus the minefields, so it was time to pack my bags and move to the next area over, Colossus. As intimidating as his name sounded, it wasn't much bigger than any of the other areas thus far, and had less objectives overall. There's literally only one sniper and one minefield. After getting down from the balloon in this area, I went to take out that singular sniper post that was fairly close by, then went over the stink gum camp called Rustbird, another camp with only 12 enemies to waste to take it over. And it's such a breeze. I was even able to do this all during one of those crazy dust storms. Alas, I was again short on ammo, and unable to fully 100% the camp at this time, as one of the insignias taunted me from above. I'd have to come back later. On my quest to destroy even more of Scrotus's property, I came upon the lone convoy in this region and took him out with a few swift hits. It's almost expected of me to get either sidetracked or into trouble with some hostiles in this game. So much so that every time I try and do something simple, like take down some scarecrows, I get wrapped up in a demolition derby with a couple of crazy drivers. This all ended with me getting the scarecrow down, but my escape was foiled by some camp's perimeter defenses. Thankfully, my proximity to this camp allowed me to be respawned nearby, though Colossus isn't all that far from the Sanctum anyway. And I actually managed to finish my current task before squirreling directly to the camp in front of me. This camp was another top dog camp and had a whopping 9 scrap to find and claim, but it was pretty open, so I shouldn't have any problems finding them all, right? Right? I got through the horde of warboys and on my way up to this top dog, and I was able to shut him down rather quickly with my patented wait for him to swing for the fences and then just lay into him technique. Once he was indisposed, I got to work on all the rest of the things to clear this camp completely, and wouldn't you know it, those 9 scrap were sneaky sons of bitches. Not all of them, of course, but a select few for sure. And that was the end of Colossus. Well, with the exception of the minefield, of course. But with a name like that, I was kind of expecting more. Oh well. I noticed at this point that the Black Maws and the Balefire Flatlands still had a few objectives missing from my checklist. I fast traveled over to the Black Maws first since it was just missing a single sniper. As I made my way to him, I upgraded both my nitro and harpoon since I was now raking in piles of scrap from my now liberated camps. And I'm not sure what compelled me to now, of all times, attempt the stunt that this entire video hinged on. I honestly should have done this like forever ago, but here I am, facing the jaw with no way to take it down. I took out the defenses so they wouldn't bother me, found a nice spot on the surrounding walls that looked scalable, and I decided to just drive up it. Now, this takes a combination of a decent amount of momentum leading up to smashing into the wall, but also a well-timed nitro while driving up the wall. I'd of course, fail on my first few tries, but honestly, I wasn't here all that long. I was now essentially in Pink Eye's territory. From here, my mission was to locate a bunch of POIs on the map using the balloon's fast travel system to hop around from area to area. Not to say that I didn't do anything in between my travels though. I tried taking on a convoy, but was thwarted too many times, so I backed off. Then I went over to a stank gum camp, Grave Bridge, where I also get routinely pummeled into the dirt. This camp, in particular, was in a higher level area, so it had more enemies, and was overall harder than the ones I've been up against so far. After getting beat down repeatedly, I had the bright idea to spend some of my scrap and show some love to Max. I gave him some new knuckle dusters, a new ammo belt, new wrist armor, and a couple new skills. I left this camp with one insignia left in it, simply because I couldn't find it. But we'll come back, I promise. On to my next balloon. I discovered Rotten Rusties that had a surprisingly decent amount of shit to do stuffed into it. Then Wailing Wind, then the Heights, then Grand Rise. I then shifted my focus to the dump. There's fortunately only one region in this area, and that region has 0 camps in it. Oh, and I wasn't mentioning it because I assumed y'all got the point by now, but I was ripping down scarecrows and snipers all along my travel. And now I needed to open up Gutgash's territories, starting with the Chalkies, then Kadavanaugh, then Reek Hills, then Parched Moon, and finally, Grit Canyons. Whew, thank God all that's over. Now it was time to get to work dismantling these threats. I started my work back up at Grit Canyons since I was already there. After toppling a few scarecrows and finding a convoy route, I smashed into Gobstone, an oil pump camp I'd come across. It was a pretty small camp. It only had 2 groups of enemies to fight before reaching my objective. And after they were all destroyed and the collectibles collected, I was out of here and headed on to the next one. There were 2 scarecrows on my way over to the next camp, Overlook. This is my least favorite camp in the game. It scales multiple stories via ladders, it's too spaced out, and there are too many tanks to blow up. It's just overall like one of the worst in my opinion. The last of the camps in this region, yes, there are 3, was Black Cove, and just as I rolled up to it to get inside, a storm rolls up on me. The storm fucks me over and I die, but I come back with a vengeance now that the storm is apparently past. Though, the guys a little deeper in here were armed with weapons and shields, and put up a pretty entertaining fight. Once the insignias were smashed and the scrap was stashed, I was on the road again. However, I discovered that although there are 2 convoys listed for this region, I can only access and take down one of them, since the other is tied to the storyline. So that means that there will be one convoy route that will remain unfinished. At this point, I put some border spikes on the Opus since I was headed toward a convoy route, and they tend to have dudes who like to jump onto your car. Another storm hit a little before reaching the convoy route, but it took the entirety of the storm to catch up to my target, so I was thankful for that. This convoy lead was easy. I could just shoot his gas tank with my shotgun and he was toast. But then, so was I. Oh well, I still got the route cleared and that's all I cared about. Now I was off to clean up Parched Moon. Of course, a couple scarecrows were downed on my way to Rook's Nest, as per usual. This next camp was a pretty standard one, though there were a pretty large group of enemies, some with shields and others with weapons, but I was able to split them up pretty well, unintentionally. I did the rest of the camp's objectives, except for one pile of scrap. This pile of scrap was a sneaky one. Oh, never mind, it's right here at the entrance. Scarecrow, sniper, scarecrow, convoy, holy shit. I got left in the dust because I had to deal with this son of a bitch before I could do anything, and once we were done fighting, the convoy was long gone. So I went to yank another scarecrow down before being graced with their presence once more. With my upgraded level 4 harpoon, I could now rip off wheels, so I took this opportunity to stop the lead vehicle in its tracks for an easy end of this fight. Oh, wait, never mind. I needed gas at this point, but I had revenge on my mind and I needed to take out this convoy if it was the last thing I did. This time, I ripped off the back panels to expose his gas tank and shot him with my shotgun. Light work. At this point, Parched Moon had just 2 scarecrows and 1 sniper left to clear it, and just like that, they were gone. Since it was the next closest region, Chalkies was where I was going next. After a couple scarecrows and a sniper were dealt with, I'd eventually get to the stank gum camp, Jugular Canyon. There's a whopping 32 enemies, 6 insignias, 10 scrap, and 1 survey crew part to deal with and or gather here. By far, the most I'd seen yet. At least, as far as stank gum camps go. This was a fairly spread out camp, so I was never really up against a ton of people all at once. At max, maybe like 7 or 8 at a time. I was well on my way to beating this camp fairly easily, but got a little bit unlucky in the very last fight. It was kind of a long trek back to that fight, so I went exploring a bit and ended up exploding open a locked door for some hidden scrap. And there was another one of these directly after fighting this last group of enemies as well. I did run out of ammo trying to shoot the last insignia in this camp, but still managed to take it down. I popped down into Cadavanaugh to get the scarecrow that was super close by, but then that snowballed into going in deeper for another, then a sniper tower, then a convoy, and at this point, I was apparently fully committed to Cadavanaugh. Though, taking on the convoy didn't really end well for me, but whatever. I still blew up the main rig and lowered the threats, and that's all that mattered. I don't know what was holding me back from finishing that last camp in the Balefire Flatlands, but I was going into re-kills next. Before heading into my first camp, I did the usual Scarecrow Sniper Smash-a-thon, but eventually came to the camp Storm Shelter. It's another oil transfer camp, but only has 5 to locate and destroy. I got rocked by the initial wave of enemies on my first and second attempt, but used different tactics on my third, and got way better results. Funnily enough, a dust storm would roll in while I was here. That's kinda ironic. And once again, I'd have trouble finding that last scrap pile in the camp, until I stumbled upon a path that was outside the camp that led up to a separate entrance, and found it there. I'd accumulated a substantial amount of Griffin tokens up to this point, so I figured I'd go and spend as many as I could. I had 51 to be exact. These tokens nearly filled all the slots I had available to me, and I was now an even bigger weapon of max destruction. On my quest to get to and locate the convoy in this area, I stopped to upgrade Max's gear once again, as I had tons of extra scrap. Eventually, a convoy stumbled into me on the roadway, but it wasn't exactly the convoy I was pursuing, though I'd run into them very shortly. My efforts would end in failure, but at least led me to a scarecrow I could dismantle. After Chum repaired the Opus up, I'd meet them once again, and failed once again. With far less cars in his crew now, this third encounter was sure to be the one. And it was. Though, it almost wasn't. After clearing up the rest of the convoy and repairing the Opus up once again, I made my way to the next camp on the map, Scorched Sand. This camp was fun, since it was full of these racks loaded with throwable thunderpoons, making short work of both my enemies and the transfer tanks. But of course, what is a camp without a sneaky piece of scrap waiting to be found? There was one more scarecrow in the area to take down before moving on, and once it was taken care of, I was headed back into Cadavanaugh. 3 scarecrows later, I was focused on infiltrating the top dog camp, Proving Grounds, and that's exactly what it was. This was probably one of the toughest camps in the game. Not that the game's all that difficult, but still, it ranks at the top of my list as far as camps go. Proving Grounds is basically a coliseum where you're pitted against a seemingly endless horde of warboys until the top dog would eventually join in. Then you'd have to juggle him on top of everything else already going on. I'm just glad I recently bought all those upgrades because I barely pulled this one off on my second try. Now that the fight was over, I could now explore the area and collect all my goodies. I fast traveled to the balloon that would get me to the next camp faster, and this was one of the lower rated ones in the area. At least, according to the in-game measuring system. A few idiots were just chilling outside the camp, so I rammed them with my car before entering in on foot. As much as there was to collect in this camp, it all made it pretty obvious where everything was. Nothing was hidden behind an unassuming wall or a container you'd have to pry open. And once this camp was done, I could move on to Cadavanaugh and finish up the Chalkies. There were still 3 camps to liberate in this area. It's weird to me that they put so many camps into this thin little region, but I digress. I ventured into the Stank Gum camp, Finger Peak, first, since, again, these are some of my favorite camps to do. The task is just so straightforward: punch guys in the face. However, this camp was stuffed with both enemies and things to collect, similar to the last one I went to. My flow through this camp was borderline flawless, up until I came to the last group of enemies. As I was attempting to push one of the blue guys off the ledge, I misjudged my footing a bit and was sent tumbling down with him. Thankfully, I didn't die, so I just had to shamefully walk my ass back up to the fight. Once I'd gotten back, I'd taken care of the 3 remaining enemies and cleared the rest of the camp. I gave the Opus some new suspension and tires following this camp, then went over to clear the next one in my path. Blood Beach was the name of this next camp, and it was a breath of fresh air with how little there was to do. Most everything was out in the open, shining and shouting, "I'm over here!" The jockeys had one more camp to be cleared out before I could move on, and it was another top dog camp, Rimjabi. Some of you might recognize that name from my other videos on this game. This was a pretty straightforward camp, again, and as I made my way up to Rimjabi, I had already collected nearly everything, and the last 2 things I needed I'd find on my way out. With this camp turned over, Gutgash's territories were now nearly completely void of threat, and it was time to move up to Pink Eye's domain, starting with some good old-fashioned scarecrow smashing and knitsack. I was on such a roll with this that I carried over into the Wailing Winds as I continued driving around pulling these things down. At one point I did come across a convoy in this area, but it seems I wasn't ready for that yet. I went back to Knitsack after this defeat and got back on track to my mission of clearing it out. There was only one enemy camp left here and I was on my way to do it. I swear I've said this twice already, but oil pump camps are some of my favorite in this game, aside from the Stank Gum ones, of course. It's hilarious how you could pretty much just run in there with something explosive and wipe the enemies out without even touching them, and sometimes the camp even provides you with the means to do so, as you saw earlier in this video. This camp does both of those things, but I still punch everyone out before taking care of the main objective. This camp was just a big round open area with a few little hidey holes, but the scrap and such were easy enough to find and claim. Taking out the remaining 2 scarecrows in this area, all that was left was this enormous convoy route that was shared with the Wailing Winds. While looking for this convoy, I would dip into the Wailing Winds, giving me an opportunity to take out a scarecrow and upgrade my harpoon. I'd eventually find this convoy and realize that it was the one I'd discovered before that sent me back to Knitsack with my tail between my legs. This time was not much different, aside from the fact that I lived a little longer. But then this happened. I spawned in at the nearest balloon and saw that the convoy was in the distance once again. This time, I made sure to handle it correctly. I went over to the next camp I saw on the map, but upon arriving would be blasted to pieces for getting my Opus stuck. The camp's doors needed a max level harpoon for some reason, but I managed to find a way around this stupid little obstacle. And, of course, one cheeky little piece of scrap wasn't wanting to be found. I bet it's back at the entrance. I found it back at the entrance. I knew it! I admit, I probably should have learned my lesson by this point, don't you think? It was at this juncture, for whatever reason, that I decided to finally finish up the Balefire Flatlands. At least, the one remaining camp there. Also, I had a ton of extra scrap, so I was just dumping into the Opus at this point. Hollow Point is an incredibly simple camp, which makes sense. It's literally in the first region you'd come to in the game. I was in and out in less than 5 minutes. Okay, back to the Wailing Winds. I took out the last of the remaining scarecrows and snipers, then made my way back to the last camp in the area, Hell's Grill. I've done this one a few times in the past, and it can be a rightful pain in the ass if you're looking to clear it. There's just a ton of little pathways and shit you wouldn't really think to look in, but with my experience in doing it, I made light work of it. Now with the Wailing Winds finished for the most part, I was off to clear out Rotten Rusty's next, which I'm just gonna call R&R from now on. Right away, this area pisses me off by having this scarecrow in the absolute dumbest location ever. but I'd eventually make this gap and take it out, amongst a few others following it. Then made my way over to Dead End. Dead End also has a gate that I'm not capable of tearing down, but thankfully they have a wide open door that I can reach by parking the Opus next to it and climbing into the camp from here. The lootables in this camp weren't the hard part for once. Instead, it was the War Boys. I don't know what it was, but I was getting wrecked by these guys repeatedly. But after a few tries, I'd have it cleared. And after leaving, I'd come across something I'd never come across yet. A scarecrow, on a platform, requiring a level 6 harpoon to take down. This was bad news. I'd have to think about this one and get back to it. Instead, I went to the local top dog camp to kill... I don't even want to try and say that name. Not gonna lie, the enemies here were tough, and it was a pretty big camp, packed full of fists flying at my face. But I'd get to the boss at the end, put an end to him, and loot the rest of the camp to completion. And... bet you couldn't guess what held me up this time. Nope, wasn't scrap this time, but an insignia hiding at the top of the fucking tower, with the ladder being hidden like this is some kind of fucking Dark Souls game or something. Now that this was clear, I moved on to Stankgum's camp, while getting some scraps along the way. This camp had a whopping 37 enemies to clear out of it, and it split between 2 silos with a bridge near the top. Like I've said before, this game doesn't usually throw a ton of enemies at you all at once, so navigating through these are pretty darn simple, until I got up to the roof and fell off. I pitifully made my way back up to the top to fight off the rest of the Legion when another one of those storms hit. It didn't really impact me all that much, and I wasn't out too long in it anyway, but after making it inside and down the next silo, trying to clear the camp out completely, I was stuck googling where the fuck the history relic was. And I'd eventually found it. I'd take out the remaining scarecrows I came across in R&R, but there were still 3 left up on these platforms, requiring a harpoon upgrade I couldn't yet access. I moved on to the heights, which really doesn't have a whole lot into it and only utilizes like a third of its total area, but thankfully I was able to pull down the scarecrows in this area and catch up with the convoy while I did so. I was able to dispatch this convoy on my first try, surprisingly, but that was mostly because I'd learned to drive up ahead of the convoys a ways if I ever needed to heal up the Opus. You know, before getting to the point of needing to emergency exit. Well, it was that, and I had enough ammo to blow up its gas tanks. Just the 2 camps were left in the heights, but I instead chose to venture into Grand Rise instead and take down some piddly scarecrows and pester a convoy enough to blow up my car. Not really though, but enough to make it undrivable for a little while. But that was it. I'd lost them. Oh well, I was going back to finish the heights anyway. My first stop was Skulltop. It was a camp set up between a few rock pillars with suspension bridges connecting them. And unfortunately, had 13 tanks for me to find and destroy. Great. Thankfully, it'd bunch a lot of them up for me in sections and provided me with some thunderpoons. So, thanks game designers. But at the same time, fuck you for placing one of the insignias in one of the most obscure places ever. Anyway, I was, for some reason, avoiding that last camp in the heights, so I was back in Grand Rise, taking out all the obscurely placed scarecrows in the dumbest possible ways. There was a top dog camp that I came to that had a massive gate requiring a level 6 harpoon to access, and at this time, there appeared to be no way around it, so I'd have to come back to this one too. I upgraded the Opus some more, because I could, and pulled down some more minor threats in Pink Eye's territory. I finally made it up and into the Choke, an oil transfer camp perched atop a bridge. I could essentially drive the Opus through this entire camp, running everyone over in my path, making this a pretty simple clear. Except that I'd find a max size hole to fall through and down to my death. Spawned back at the gates on foot, and I came to realize that there were still more enemies in this camp, and the perimeter defenses were my ultimate ops. There weren't a ton of things to find or objectives to dispose of here, but how much do you expect them to hoard on a bridge? And now I sought payback from the convoy that defeated me earlier, and with the ancient power within my shotgun to explode fuel tanks by shooting at them, I set them to rest rather trivially. Old Hole was the last camp that I could access in this region, and being so deep into the story world, I was surprised that it didn't offer much of a challenge. I mean, sure, it had a boss type enemy at the end, but the collectibles were easy to find, and oil pump camps in general are just free real estate. So, yeah. Putting off that camp in the heights some more for some reason, I went into the dump to take care of the Soul 5 scarecrows lording over this region. Well, there were some snipers too, but I took those out earlier. Oh, and the minefield, but we'll get there. Hold your horses. Psych, we're doing it now. I guess I just didn't see the camp up there at the time. So, the minefields. Man, have I got a lot to say about these things. But it would only be me ranting and not really adding value to you or this video. But the basic gist of doing these minefields before talking with Jeet is that you don't have access to Chum's buggy, which means you don't have access to Dinky D to help you sniff out these mines. So what I had to do was find any little scrap of video showing me where each of these mines were located so that I could then replicate that in my game. But instead of discovering them by hand and safely, I had to drive over them and explode my Opus. Thankfully, I could just exit and Chum would just fix her back up, but this was a time-consuming and soul-sucking experience. Especially since there's very little media in regards to this game out there. But here's some hilarious moments from my experience with the minefields, so it's not completely glossed over. Now that I'd gotten Jeet's threat level down to 0, I could finally build the level 6 harpoon and gain access to that camp in Grand Rise. Just another simple top dog camp here. Punch guys, collect things, punch big guy at the end. After finishing the minefield in the heights, I was just about to travel to the dump until I realized that it was still yellow. I was missing something. Okay, this was by far, and I know I said it earlier, but this was by far the worst camp in the game, from a layout perspective at least. You couldn't even really call it a camp. It's more like a couple of shacks spread out over an oil field. I was so frustrated that I just left this camp with 2 scrap left to find to go take care of those last few pesky scarecrows in R&R, since I now had the upgraded weaponry. Also clearing its 2 minefields. Then, finally, to wrap everything up in a nice neat little bow, I went back to all the camps that I'd missed things in and officially put this challenge to bed. Unless you want me to finish the rest of the map? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Either way, I found out that it's indeed possible to complete the entire map and reduce the threats of every faction down to 0 before even speaking with Jeet. Well, with the exception of the story unlocked convoy in Gutgash's territory, of course. Anyway, this was a bit longer video than I've been putting out recently, so I hope you liked it. I enjoyed making it, and I can't wait to start working on the next one for y'all. Anyways, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you like me. Thank you for being here, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.